Welcome to episode 6, my podcast, Bruises Pod, where every scar tells a story. Again, I'm Jessica Elmish. I'm the author of Camouflage Bruises. Before we get started, I would like to welcome our newest member to the team.
Hello, hello,
Luna.
Hello, I'm excited to be here. I'm very curious for today's topic. I'm
Yes,
gonna learn right along with you what it's gonna be about. So let's go on this journey.
exactly. I've kind of held my cards close on this topic so we could all discover together. I want to give a shout out again to Ethan, my sound engineer, masterclass. And today, before I even touch on the specific topic, talk about divine intervention and the universe lining up the stars for us in terms of the themes of this podcast and the messages that we're trying to put out there for our audiences and multi-generational audiences about, if you haven't been with us in the previous podcast, we've touched on some common themes like the evolution of our society, integrating the identity journey. Just last week, and raise your hand if you were clued in on this. I don't know if you're watching mainstream media. Like, hopefully you're watching my podcast now, right? And I'm going to give it to you. No pun intended. Straight. But not really that straight.
As straight as possible.
As straight as possible. Clear and as authentic as possible. Last week, President Biden, he has he has made eligible. There's all sorts of ways presidents can interfere, and they can have like executive orders, policies, but he has declared that former military members, veterans, that were discharged dishonorably with a felon on their record, deprived of their military VA benefits because sodomy was criminalized during their term of service. He has officially pardoned those veterans. And so now they are out. It's not sort of like, he waved a magic wand and now everybody, they have to go through an application process where they, there's a process, there's a paperwork process, of course, but they're eligible for it now. They can go ahead and apply for a discharge, what we call a discharge upgrade. So this is exciting news. I mean, we are living it, right? We are coming out of the dark age. It's a continuing evolutionary process for us. And I'm going to say, in the United States of America. So I know there are some folks out there, they've got their complaint list about our country, and it's always fine to keep holding us to higher standards as a country, as a society. But I'm telling you, if you go back to episode 1 and follow us to episode 6, look at what is happening in real time. This country is still reaching for progress. We are still reaching for equality. It's happening right in front of us. This is what happened last week. For those friends of mine that are veterans that served during those years, we have been talking about this. I was honorably discharged. I don't have, no. I you can laugh if you like, but the sodomy interaction was not a part of my service. So that's not a problem for me. I was honorably discharged. But for those folks that were caught in the act of criminal sexual behavior back then, this is a wonderful time for them. Their families, their dependents. But let's not get ahead. I just want to put that out there so that we can celebrate that before we even get started, because this goes to show you, well, pretty much everything that I have been talking about from episode 1 about our society evolving. And look, we're doing it now even. Whether you like the current president or not is kind of irrelevant. We as a country, once again, are showing the world that we are leading progress. And that's something to be proud of. Absolutely. It just so happens that the topic for today, the last episode was about forbidden love. And Luna, you weren't here for that, but it was forbidden love, right? And now this episode is going to be about forbidden acts. Okay? Forbidden acts. Sodomy. Let's just say it. Okay? It's not a dirty word. It's a legal word, actually. Our country made it a legal word.
Can I ask, what is the definition of sodomy?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that was what I was just going to ask. I was going to throw it out to you folks, actually. But more specifically about the question, someone please remind me, is sodomy a straight thing or a gay male thing, right?
That's a good question. Let me...
Or is it a lesbian dildo thing? I mean, let's put it out there. Open for interpretation. But our country has had a problem with this sexual act for quite some time. In fact, they've had a problem with it, well, at least within the U.S. military, since 1917.
Okay. I think this is...
Are you bringing anything up on Wikipedia?
Yes. On the dictionary, sexual intercourse involving anal or oral copulation.
Pretty broad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
But, the hypocrisy of it all is that it seemed like it was okay for straight people to engage in sodomy.
Right.
But not folks, particularly men of the same sex,
right,
to engage in that act. Okay? We criminalized it in the military, in particular, as far back as I can reach, in my notes anyway, 1917, okay, anti-sodomy laws in the U.S. military were enacted under the Articles of War. And then we went ahead and codified it in 1950 under the UCMJ, which stands for Uniform Code of Military Justice, okay? So it was codified under Article 125. Sounds so legally technical, right? Now, Article 125, that's important because it made sodomy a punishable offense, and it just so happens that that's the article that President Biden went ahead and pardoned folks on. Just Article 125, okay? Now, there are other laws in the U.S. military that criminalize same-sex behavior. But President Biden only touched on the 125 article, okay? You had to be engaged in sodomy in order to be eligible for this pardon, okay? Yeah. So, before I move any further, because I know I tend to like to crank things back in time so that we can put things in historical perspective. Yeah. But I also like to draw from the book Camouflage Bruises and try to integrate some of that. Not, again, I don't like to give away the whole story, but just little pieces that are relevant to the theme of the day, right? The topic of the day. There's a quote in the book. There's a scene. Oh, I remember this so clearly. I was kind of vanilla. I was a vanilla young female Marine. And when I witnessed this, the scene's in the book, but when I witnessed this scene, I think it was about 21. Okay. I was 21. And I think this was probably the first visual that I ever had of what I considered pornographic behavior. So what am I referring to? Well, I remember being in the barracks. My Marine friends and I, we were, hanging out, and we were walking down the hallway in the barracks, and we heard some hooting, some hollering, some whistling. Okay. Not uncommon. You got a bunch of young male Marines, on the weekend drinking, not uncommon. But this time it was particularly raucous. So we went, and we were like, oh, that's, I won't say the real name, but that's Corporal so-and-so's room. We knew the Marine, was one of our friends, so we went, knocked on the hatch, as we call it, in the door, and they let us in. Yeah, it was a group. Well, maybe like 10. Yeah. And they were all huddled around the TV. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have computers. We didn't even have email back then. I know, laugh now. We didn't even have email. And the internet, that was it was only used at that time for the Department of Defense. So we had a TV, and there was a VHS tape playing. I'm like, oh, wow. I saw the images and I recognized the individuals in the video. One was a female Marine that I knew, and one was one of my male Marines under my charge. I was a sergeant at that time, and he was a lance corporal. I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? Well, what is going on was completely normal and natural if you're heterosexual. You follow me here? In other words, sodomy laws didn't apply to them necessarily. Nobody was out to get them because they were doing what they were doing. I'd never seen such a thing. I was kind of vanilla. And I remember there was a lot of like jeering and chanting, and one of the Marines behind me yelled, and this is a quote from the book, "Ride 'em, Lone Ranger." I'm like, okay. I had kind of mixed feelings about the moment, really, because she looked like she was enjoying herself, honestly. It's not my cup of tea, but clearly it was hers, and it was his. Two consenting adults in the video engaging in this sexual act. For me, at that time, I was still grappling with my own sexual identity / orientation. And that was during the don't ask, don't tell era. So I had these really like uncomfortable feelings. So I wasn't sure. Well, plus I was a woman around all of these young men chanting some even misogynistic things. Even though she was enjoying it, she had no idea that this video would be passed around. She's moaning and pushing herself into this moment, and she had no idea. Her fellow Marines are watching this. It was very embarrassing. Yes. I won't go any further. You're going to have to, if you care to know how this ends up, you got to get the book. But I wanted to draw on that scene because it's very relevant to not only what President Biden just pardoned, but the topic of the day, which is forbidden acts. Okay? Who decides what is a forbidden act? I know religion plays a part, right? And in our history, in our country, a major part. And, we're supposed to be a country where there's, religious freedom and a separation of church and state, right? Luna, do you remember any of this in junior high? Right, they taught us some of this.
I definitely remember when the don't ask, don't tell was kind of like a huge topic, and when they were starting to talk about, okay, maybe let's remove that. I remember.
You do remember?
I remember that conversation being held, and so I remember that, and
well, it's been an ongoing conversation, and thankfully, well, as a country, I mean, outside of the military, right, as a country, the U.S. Supreme Court, I like to draw on the U.S. Supreme Court. These are landmark cases, and we should continue to put things into historical perspective so that we can appreciate where we are now. And I've said this before in the other podcast. I'm going to keep on saying it. We have every right as diverse people. Anyone who doesn't fit nicely into the hetero binary dynamic, you have every reason in 2024, this very day, to be full of courage and love for yourself. Yeah. As evidence to just what just happened last week. I mean, our country is continuing to recognize, to correct wrongs. So yeah, it's out in the open. And honestly, you should be out in the open if you're out there hiding out still with insecurities. But that's a process. That's an individual journey for everyone. And we can only hope that, that people are getting the support they need to make it through that journey. It's not easy. It's not always easy. But yeah, as a country, outside of, anti-sodomy laws in the military, as a country, the U.S. Supreme Court in a landmark case, Lawrence versus Texas, in 2003, really not that long ago, struck down anti-sodomy laws, which really, legitimized and legalized, certainly for men, male-to-male relationships, sexual relationships. They decriminalized their sexual activity, their lovemaking, however you want to say it. But that was only in 2003. But we did it as a country. We did it, right? It got struck down. And then don't ask, don't tell in the military, in the U.S. military, Clinton put that in place, which taught us to lie really well. This was always in the conversation. It's like, well, okay, you don't ask and I don't tell. But it really kind of kept people in the shadows still.
It's like a code of silence in a way, right?
Exactly. And, what does that do to your identity? When in past podcasts, I talked about, your identity being shattered and how important it was to keep that center, that authentic center, in the face of pushback or when our society is making an effort to evolve. So the don't ask, don't tell policy certainly was, President Bill Clinton's, I have to call it a compromise, because he did get all those votes, right?
Yeah.
From the LGBTQ community.
That was his attempt to be as neutral as possible.
Yes.
And something that a lot of people were really curious to see what he was trying to do.
Correct. And he gifted us. That was what he gave us, the don't ask, don't tell. And there was like a resounding disappointment. I remember that time. And certainly in the early 90s, we were all still living in fear or denial, self-loathing. But yeah, the don't ask, don't tell policy that Clinton put in place, that wasn't repealed until 2011, right? This is all very recent. I mean, at least to me, it feels recent. Okay. And that still didn't right all the wrongs, for, the military convictions that happened prior to and during the don't ask, don't tell, because those anti-sodomy laws were still in place. Okay. And again, under the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, active duty military folks were prosecuted and stamped with a felony on the record. And that translates into a felony in the civilian world. And by the way, you don't get any VA benefits. Your dependents don't get VA benefits. It's a lot. It's a lot. They would have a dishonorable discharge on their record also. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely are continuing to evolve as a society. I'm really proud of the progress that we continue to make, and in particular, in this political environment that is so polarized. I don't think we've seen it quite this polarized since the Civil War. I wasn't there, but I read about it.
Right.
And there was a war for a reason, right? Brother against brother, they call it. But, in this kind of climate where our country is seemingly so polarized, and certain politicians, I won't name all the names today, but we can certainly, make a list and check it twice later and make a separate podcast about it. But there are some politicians that have certainly capitalized on this, even encouraged it. Folks, we need to be aware of the messages that are directed at us and the messages that we allow ourselves to absorb. We really do. And I'm talking to like the whole spectrum. I'm not just talking about the hetero team or the LGBT. I'm talking about everybody. Because to tell you the truth, I have an ear on my left and right side, and I'm listening to everything. And we're getting like a little bit extreme on both ends, I think, in ways. Hey, there was a time when I thought I was one of the most liberal humans on planet Earth. And I'm realizing that, I think some of the younger people in the younger generation would actually consider me more of a moderate, but I would never have imagined that I would be identified as that, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And I think that's why I said earlier that I don't really consider myself a professor in this chair. Like, I'm here to learn also, particularly from the younger generations. That's why I want to open up the conversation, and so that we can talk about this together. We shouldn't partition each other off just because we're not in the same generation. I think we have a lot of gems to offer each other, right? So my goal, really, through the podcast, one of my goals is to break down those partitions and get the conversations going. Yeah. So we can have a better understanding of, our common ground. We honestly have a lot of common ground. But because we have politicians that benefit from us looking at all of our differences and getting riled up about all of our differences, I think we start to lose ourselves there. And certainly as a country, the world, the international audience is watching us. We are supposed to be the leaders. We are supposed to set the example. We are the ones that put the flag in the ground with democracy, remember? And they honestly, my friends in other countries, they get a little bit like shaky in the knees when things happen, like our own people try to attack our capital. Like, people are calling me like, what, from Argentina? Like, Jessica, is this real? I'm like, calm down. We're gonna get a handle on this. They're like, we respect and look up to your country so much. Like, this is so sad what is happening. Like, I know. And they think I'm an expert because I'm a Marine veteran, right? Like, trust me, we're gonna get a handle on the situation. And sure enough, those folks that participated in that, they've been dragged out by the ankles and brought to justice. Because it's not all fun and games. You can have a difference of opinion, okay? But you cannot engage in treason in this country. Now, it used to be off with your head, if you engaged in treason. We have more, a cleaner way of dealing with folks that commit those crimes, right? We have, grand juries, we have investigations, and we have a legal process. I think we have one of the greatest legal systems in the world. We have checks and balances in it. It's not perfect, but my hair is not perfect. But the fact that we do have a structured system in place, and we are always reevaluating. My friends, really, that have worked in the Department of Justice, the FBI, and some of those agencies that people, they think they are the boogeyman in the closet. Like, there's some really excellent quality human beings working to protect us and to try to keep things fair and square in this country. And honestly, they don't get enough of the right attention whenever something goes wrong, then all of a sudden there's like something that goes viral, and then this sort of taints what is reality. What is reality? So, yeah, if anything, what President Biden if another president that I didn't vote for had done exactly what President Biden just did, I would be, hey, you know what? Excellent. Accolades to you for doing that. So it's not about, oh, you just like this president and you just like this, No, I like progress. I like people in this country being recognized and protected and validated for who they are. These are consenting adults, right? People should be allowed to love who they are in love with and express that love in ways that they want to. This is a private matter. And you don't even have to be in love to have sex. But these are private matters, okay? And I'm glad that our country is continuing to recognize and making efforts to evolve. I'm so excited about this. Yeah, even though it's like I don't directly benefit from this because, I didn't have that issue in the military. This affects people that, are friends of mine, and people that aren't even friends of mine. Just my fellow country people. I'm a Marine veteran, and I still have that protective nature about me. Okay, I don't have to be this big muscly man to want to protect. By the way, okay, and I realized that when I went to jump school as a young woman.
What is jump school?
Jump school. Oh yeah. Well, it's in the book. Jump school it's like a special school, kind of like scuba diving school, scuba school, where our military, in particular the Marine Corps and the Army, we send our special forces to get specialized training, right? And, there was a time when women weren't allowed because it wasn't deemed necessary, right? You weren't allowed to be in combat, so why do you have to say, and they can't hack it anyway, they're too weak, right? I mean, there was all of this back then, right? Well, as I demonstrate in Camouflage Bruises, I was one of the test cases at that time because I was such a high performer physically that the brass recognized, it was kind of like a G.I. Jane scenario, like, someone in Congress wanted these test cases. And so the brass at my base recognized that, there was this little fit woman Marine that was doing push-ups, pull-ups, and like hanging like the guys. And they're like, yeah, like let's get mission this. So they sent me to jump school to see if I could make it. And not only was I a woman, but I was kind of like not a big one. So everybody was really interested to see if I would make it through. Okay, and I'll let you folks figure that one out if you dare to read the book. And the audiobook, by the way, is coming out thanks to Ethan expediting things for us. Sorry, it's been a little delayed in the release, but Ethan my sound engineer, my master class, he has been on it over the past week. So Audible, it should be in the hands of Audible very quickly and out the QC gate, right? So if you're not a reader, you don't have time to read, but you're commuting to work with your little cafecito, you might want to just listen in to the audiobook. Yeah, so when they sent me to jump school, that was our military's way of trying to evolve and integrate women into combat roles. Okay, let's see if they can do it. Yeah, so jump school, to answer your question again, jump school is a school for like special forces, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, Navy SEALs. And so, yeah, going back to this stereotype of, what heroes and protectors are supposed to look like. Well, I found out what the reality is. And in jump school, the ones that, it was a mixture of, the Israeli soldiers, we had some foreign soldiers, we had certainly Army, this is Army school manning, and some Marines, Marine recon, snipers also, and Navy SEALs, which in the SEALs, when they're coming through, they haven't graduated yet. They're called buds. So they were buds, Navy SEAL buds. We were all training together. And I remember, and this is also a scene in the book, and I'm just going to touch on it just a little bit. But before chow, which is before you could go eat, okay, you first had to like run. You had to run everywhere. There was no walking ever. Always running the entire time. No walking is allowed. Always running. So we would run towards the chow hall, and before you could eat, you had to do 20 dead hang pull-ups before you could even eat. Now, what is a dead hang pull-up? It means don't cheat. Your arms have to go all the way down and all the way up. So you couldn't even access food after a day of running around with these heavy packs and rifles and training, throwing yourself on the ground off towers, training to, jump out of a plane. Like, you couldn't even access food unless you first did 20 dead hang pull-ups. And, we're all lined up, and not everybody could do them. And yes, they were men, right? Because there's not, I think me and another woman, just 2 women, I believe, were it was an Army female captain. And then there was me, just 2 females. But yeah, even the guys struggled. And of course, the instructors, they call them the black cat cadres, screaming at them. You had to go back and do, all of this nonsense that comes with intense training. And so anyway, I remember there was a Navy SEAL bud behind me. He wasn't much taller than, we were both kind of short, but he was like, kind of like, he was a stocky guy. He was a tough dude. But I heard him whispering to another SEAL, well, buds. They're not SEALs yet, they're buds. I believe that's how it works in the Navy SEALs. I think first you've got to go through, you're a bud, and then you graduate, and then you become a SEAL. Correct me if I'm wrong, Navy. I was never a SEAL, sorry, but I believe that's how it works. But yeah, they were like talking about me. I was like waiting my turn to do my dead hang pull-ups so I could eat. And I'm like, yeah, what is she doing here? Like, she can't do this. I was used to this kind of talk, of course, being in the Marine Corps, right? But I'm like, here we go again. I heard them talking about me. Yeah, what is she doing here? Why do they have her here? Like, and sure enough, it was my turn came to do the dead hang pull-ups, and I did them, 20 dead hang pull-ups, because I can maneuver my body, right? I had the upper body strength to maneuver. It was all lean muscle mass. I had no fat. It was a piece of cake for me. And then I dropped from the bar after doing 20, and then I heard him say, "Oh, that's why she's here." But yeah, when you're in combat, imagine, okay, most people don't go to combat, but even when you're training for combat in the field, you're not able to access like protein shakes and your 24-hour fitness, bench press, like you don't have any of that. If you're a POW, what happens to you? You lose a lot of body weight. You lose a lot of everything. So how do you survive? It's the warrior that's up here that is key. There's a lot of big, bulky, muscular people, and they don't know how to maneuver combat necessarily. So yeah, this stereotype of like, oh, heroes and protectors are these big, muscular men. This is, hopefully we've considered this a thing of the past, really. But anyway, because there are men that aren't big and muscular that are excellent at their technical, physical jobs, and women too, okay? But anyway, I digress. The sodomy laws, right? The anti-sodomy laws. Again, this is just another example of how our society in the United States of America is continuing to evolve. And honestly, it's a moment we should all be proud of, even if you don't engage in sodomy. People have a right to love who they want to love, consenting adults, Okay? And they have a right to express that in the privacy of their own quarters. That's their business. Maybe not your cup of tea, but you're not a part of it, so stay out of it. Okay? And thankfully, our current president has agreed with that, is in accordance with that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I mean, I was wondering how I would like frame this, because it is kind of, how many people talk about sodomy, really?
This week, I've only
How many
heard
times?
about. I'm just kidding. I've only heard
Right.
about 3 people.
You know, and that's okay. Look, you know what? And that's your private business, really.
I'm just kidding.
And you're no judging, and you're protected by the laws. No, but seriously, it's not something that we talk about on a regular basis, in particular when it comes to legislation. But if folks aren't aware of recent, I don't know if you watch the news or where you get your news source from. Hopefully I can offer some valid information. I like to draw on landmark cases. Do I have opinions about things? Well, yeah, I have opinions, but I also like to, I'm a Yale graduate, so I like to stick to facts you can find, not imaginary facts. Not facts that morph, not facts that, you can go, I'm old fashioned. Go, landmark, and in particular, I like to really draw on U.S. Supreme Court landmark cases. Those are easy to find and hard to contest. Like, you can't say, "Oh, that didn't happen." Yeah, it did happen. It's a U.S. Supreme Court, so that's easy, and I like to draw on that. So this is news. Our country, as of last week, has made a huge leap once again in evolving and protecting the rights of every person in this country. And I'm going to drink to that. Did you get that tequila? Yeah,
Hopefully, it was the right brand.
You're new. You should have clued her in. It's okay. You're new.
I just grabbed what I saw. I didn't know if we were going for a specific brand or not. Hopefully, it's up to par.
Right. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming back again. I'm Jessica L. Mish, the author of Camouflage Bruises, and the host of Bruises Pod, where every scar tells a story. Hopefully we'll see you next time.